Hello everyone. So in this video, we are going to see 3 survival techniques in the forest. These 3 survival techniques, I selected them because they are relatively easy to learn, easy to appropriate, and they are often unknown. So we can use them in any forest area. And you will see that they can be useful one day or another in a survival setting, classic hiking or even bivouac or camping. Don't forget that in complicated conditions, it's always the terrain that commands. So this is where knowledge can make a difference. You will see that these 3 techniques are easy to implement, easy to integrate. I advise you to practice it in order to verify its feasibility and validity. So the first technique is a technique that will allow us to sharpen all kinds of blades, whether it's knives, a hatchet, an axe, or something else. So it's a technique that we use in the forest when there are no stones, generally, to sharpen, obviously correctly, a blade. We use a stone. It can be a stone that we have on us, but it can also be a stone that we find on the ground. Since we are in the forest, there is nothing here, not even limestone. We will use clay and see how we proceed. So, there is no need to take a lot. That will be more than enough. So if, like here, you have small pebbles or dirt, small pieces of wood, which we often find, you remove them. As with any good sharpening, you will need to keep your angle between the abrasive surface and the knife constant. So you should know that if you use clay, you will have a very, very fine grain. So you will achieve quite high levels of sharpening, almost razor sharp. If you use sand or loamy sand, it will be a bit less good, but you will still be able to sharpen your knife or hatchet if you need to. So what's important in this technique is that you will absolutely have to use standing wood. That is wood that has been cut perpendicular to the grain of the wood, along the grain of the wood. Once you've got your sharpening down, you can use any piece of wood. So this time, along the grain, in the direction of the wood grain, so as to use it as a strop, what we call a strop, and there you will go to hardwood preferably, and there you finish the edge. There you go. All you have left to do is to clean the knife well, and theoretically I would have a sharpened knife without a stone in the forest. There you go. We're not on the razor, but not far. Now let's move on to the second technique we'll cover in this video. Now that we have a well-sharpened knife, we are going to see how to go from a log like this one to a half log along the entire length. So why do that? Firstly, it's going to double the resources. Since from one log, we are going to go to two logs, to two half logs, it's going to double the resources. Sometimes we are a bit short, we can't cut a lot, there isn't much, so it's interesting to have a little more. Secondly, for the assemblies, it will be much easier. So these half logs, we are going to use them in particular for the manufacture of utensils for cooking food, like grills, tripods, skewers. And you can split them in two, but of course you can split them into four with the technique I'm going to give you. Of course, there is the construction of shelters, which will be very important with the half logs. But you have a whole bunch of uses, countless uses in nature, in reality. So first of all, you will need to find a shrub or a small tree in order to wedge the log in this way. We will see why later. So the first thing to do now is to identify the direction of the wood's growth, meaning that you should always cut the piece of wood from top to bottom. So here we see that there is a larger section here, a slightly smaller section here, so we know that the top is here. The wood has grown like this, so we're going to attack it from the top down. So we're going to position ourselves on the axis and we're going to start the notch. So now we're going to have to be very careful when we start to open the wood. You're going to have the crack that usually goes a little more on one side than the other. So you'll have one side that will start to thicken, a half round that will become a bit more important than the other. So we're going to have to watch out for that and make sure this phenomenon doesn't accelerate too much. So generally it's at the level of the nodes like here, where you're going to have this phenomenon start. Here, it's not going too badly for now, but there I can already see, you see there's a node here. And at this level, it's starting to thin out. So, to correct the bad orientation of the cut, now we're going to brace ourselves and pull on the outside of the strongest part of the two pieces of wood, and that's where the bracing is important. And there we're going to correct the offset of the crack. So we're going to continue now in the same way, very slowly. And if we notice a bevel, we will have to start over. So here we are about to leave. Since we are at the end, it won't be easy, but we will try anyway. And there you have it. So I'll let you imagine. This one, which was really twisted, with knots, with a wire that is not really straight. If we hadn't used the technique for this log, there's a good chance that in the end, we wouldn't have had two half rounds like this. Very clean, but two completely different pieces. Let's now examine the final technique covered in this video. We have our half logs. We will need to bind them, so we will use brambles for that, the common brambles that we find a lot here. So I'm going to look for the brambles, especially in areas like this, where they will have supports to climb and where there is not too much light. We will encounter very long brambles. Later, we'll discover alternative methods to achieve the same result. But brambles are particularly suited for this job. So here, you will easily have brambles that are 5, 6, some weight, 10 m. So the technique will be to keep the rows standing, and then we will remove all the thorns with a knife. Then you'll see we're going to give it a treatment. Ways to use it to tie our logs. So in the end, what we're doing is a rope. So you should know that this technique, you can do it with many small shrubs, even with hazel that we have here, from the ground. Finally, in all countries of the world, you will find in all forest areas, you will relatively easily find shrubs or vines of this type that lend themselves to it. So the wild bramble is really exceptional. It's very fibrous, and it's perfect for the technique I'm going to show you. So once you've done a good cleaning and you no longer have any thorns, you take a small log like this, split, which you split with a knife and you pinch the end of the bramble. And at that moment, you will be able to turn your bramble. And we will see that it will break the fibers of the bramble, but without breaking it in half. So here, the goal is to twist it as much as possible without exaggeration, of course, in order to soften it well. We can twist it one way and twist it the other if we want. If they are a bit thick, like this one, so we can do it on brambles that are thinner too, of course. Now, I'm going to redo it on the other side, and it will have the effect of softening it well. So once we've finished turning it, we find a tree with a radius of curvature, a diameter that is not too small, still not a sapling, and we continue to soften it there in this way. So to bind these two parts, I'm going to make a square lashing or the equivalent of a square lashing. So the round turns away, it's quite normal. In fact, the turning has had the effect of softening it. There you go. The presentation of these 3 survival techniques is now over survival in the forest. I hope you enjoyed it, that it taught you something. Above all, know that there are many details and many variations that I could not cover. I'll see you soon for new topics in a future video.